discussion of the topic. My crude, informal measure of the success of a speaker is the percentage of the audience that comes back in to participate after the refreshments, and so I would say that tonight Wes did a fine job. Wes, I'll just let you handle what goes on here, and I'll carry a microphone around if people have questions.
Okay, I should turn this back on. Is this working? Now. Well, I may just have to shout. The battery died, so I'll just keep back with this. Okay.
I don't mind if you work too hard.
All right. So this one is working? No. Nope. How do you turn it on? All right. How do you turn it on? This one's on? Okay. All these complications. Okay. Well, let me just suggest, for many of us, the question of whether or not inequality is a good or a bad thing is a no-brainer. It's not a good thing, it's not desirable, and so on. But there are arguments that come typically, a lot of stuff that I have on this is from relatively conservative economists who write about these sorts of things. And so there are arguments that say we shouldn't worry about inequality. One of these arguments I think makes some sense. Most of them I don't agree with, but I think they're legitimate points of view and they should be out there. So let me go through the arguments that it's not a problem, and then the arguments that it is a problem. You have all of this, and let me run through them very quickly, and then we'll just get you guys to perhaps tell me what you think. So the one set of arguments about inequality that is really not a problem would suggest that basically you've got a market economy. Some people are going to do well, and some people are not going to do well. There's nothing really there to worry about. The people who are doing well have made great contributions to society, and they should be rewarded for their contributions and so on. Another argument from a Canadian economist is that basically you can have inequality brought about by people who make great contributions and reap great rewards. That's okay, I'll just use this one. Oh, okay. But anyway, the people who made great contributions deserve great rewards, or they've had great luck, won the lottery and that sort of thing. And we shouldn't begrudge those people their gains. If people have gotten rich fraudulently or so on, well, that's a problem and we should go after that. But otherwise, why worry about it, okay? And again, this sort of morphs into the discussion about, and again, this is one of the problems, because nobody would ever argue that we should have perfect equality. I don't think anybody wants to argue that. But the idea that if you did have perfect equality, you redistributed income so that you have that, you'd end up taking away the incentives for people to work hard, and we'd all be worse off, and so on. So that's one argument. Now this is the one I think that may have some sense to it, which goes back to the red bit at the beginning. If you is it really inequality that's the problem, or is it the problem that we have because of poverty? In other words, is it because people are at the bottom of the income distribution, or is it because the people at the bottom of the income distribution are poor? Is it inequality or poverty that matters? And there are a lot of people who argue that we should focus more on poverty than on inequality. And then another argument that has it has a serious problem that I think, but it's the idea that a lot of conservatives have argued that we shouldn't focus on equality of outcomes, but we should focus on equality of opportunity. If we guarantee equality of opportunity at the outset, where people end up is largely their own fault, and so we shouldn't worry about the outcomes at the end. I think that's wrong on a number of fronts, but the main one is that what happens, even if we don't have equality of opportunity, again, if people who have different kind of political persuasion than I have want to try to work on getting better equality of opportunity, I'm all for that. I'm quite happy to work with people on that. but we don't have it. If we did have it, there would still be a problem subsequently, because luck plays a big role in what happens to people, it seems to me. And even if we all start at the same place, we won't have the same kinds of experiences, because some people will fall off the ladder and some won't. So now the arguments on the other side, inequality can seem inherently unfair, and so it can lead to social unrest. There's quite a bit of evidence to this. Inequality, independently of the poverty issue, there's some evidence that being at the bottom of the totem pole causes stress. Even if you have enough, even if you're getting by, it causes stress. This little observation, I don't remember where I got that, but it shows that the life expectancy for people at the bottom is 14 years less than men at the top. Now, these are all wage earners, so these are not the destitute poor. These are people who are all earning wages. They may be working poor, but 14 years difference in life expectancy. Some of that may be due just to poverty, but I think some of it may also be due to the difficulties of being at the bottom of the income distribution. I think one of the arguments that is problematic about inequality is that it can lead to income and wealth confer status and power on people, and you can end up, the more unequal the distribution of income is, the greater the inequality, the more the chances are that the high income people will be able to distort the political system, undermine democracy. I've already made a point about the equality of opportunity doesn't account for luck. The fact that if more income goes to the wealthy, this is a double-edged sword, actually. The more income going to the wealthy, here's a little thought experiment for you. If your after-tax income is $10 million, and you divide that by 365, you come out with about $27,000 a day. Now, I could probably spend $27,000 tomorrow. I could maybe do it the day after. But could I keep doing that day after day after day, year after year? No. So that means that the high-income people are going to end up saving a lot of their income instead of spending it. And if the economy is at a stage where it needs to be stimulated, you need spending, this would actually act as a drain on economic growth. On the other hand, savings are what fund investments, which make the economy grow. So in the long run, savings are good, but in short term, they may not be, because it may distort the economy a little bit. It is also the case that a lot of countries that have high income, like the US, have high income inequality, also have relatively low social mobility. So we don't believe in that. We believe in the American dream. If you work hard and play by the rules, you can do anything, and so on. But the data seem to suggest that for the United States, the place where you're born, the level of income, your socioeconomic class when you're born is where you usually end up. And we actually have lower social mobility than a lot of European countries. So I don't know why theoretically it would be the case that high income inequality would cause low social mobility, but there does seem to at least be a correlation there. So if it's a bad thing, what can we do about it? Well, we know that a lot of people oppose to education. My own feeling is that we ought to be looking, I'm a university professor, but I don't think everybody should go to university. I think we ought to be looking for other post-secondary education opportunities, training and apprenticeships and things of that nature. I think that the electrician who comes to my house and does what I can't do, which is to fix the problem I'm having with electricity, ought to be paid the same amount of money I'm being paid. Yeah. What he's doing is as important, certainly, as what I'm doing. And so I do think that there's a need for other kinds of opportunities for people. Some of these other things, you know, the problem is that the people who could affect these changes don't have an interest in doing that, right? To reduce the influence of money in the political system? Well, the people who could do that are the people who benefit from the money in the political system. So these are pretty tough things to do, but they might have some impact. Raise taxes on the very wealthy. Mr. Piketty does this. I think you probably remember these at this stage. But, What else? What else do we have there? You all can start talking. Okay. Strengthening labor unions, working on tax havens, working on public policies that give loopholes. Some people would argue that we should slow globalization and technological change. I don't think that's a good idea because I think we benefit from globalization and technological change. We don't want to give up those benefits, but we ought to try to see if we can find a way to manage them in a way that will not cause as much harm as they may have been causing. You know, we will probably hear something about inequality in the environment. One of the things about the environment is that if you do a map of Superfund sites in the United States, and then you lay over that a map of counties that are predominantly inhabited by people of color, there's a pretty close correspondence. So this is sort of the environmental racism and the environmental the way that we regulate our environmental activities could be done in a way that would have less of a harmful impact on low-income people. So I think there's a lot of public policies that could be done, and that's it. That's all I want to do at this stage. So I'll tell you about this. This thing is mainly, you have it, it's mainly interesting because this is my friend Milanovic here. He says that, that Europe is more democratic than the United States. Any of you think that might be true? Europe, they're mostly parliamentary systems, so that, you remember 1992, Ross Perot got 19% of the vote and 0 representation in Congress. So that's one element. Most people have some representation, regardless if you've got 48 parties or something in the parliament. The campaigns are shorter. Less money is involved in the campaigns, electoral campaigns in Europe. And they don't have a thing like our electoral college, which is completely undemocratic. A vote for president in Wyoming is equivalent to 3.5 votes cast in California. Now, what kind of democracy is that, where a vote cast in one place counts for more than votes cast elsewhere? So I think there's something to this notion. But the thing is, what he suggests is that because the European countries are more democratic, they are more likely to respond to popular demands. And so he predicts nativism and populism and all this stuff, and some of which we sort of see going on in Europe at the moment. In the United States, he says that because we're less democratic, we respond more to the interests of the wealthy. And there's some evidence that that's true. So he predicts that the U.S. will end up with a plutocracy. And if we look at Mr. Trump's cabinet, this is certainly a gazillionaires club, it seems to me. So maybe that's right. And then he has this quote that you can all read here about what he thinks that this all means. So it's kind of a gloomy thing. Anyway, does anyone have questions or comments? I'm real interested in.
So hand up here first.
Going back to that 14-year difference in life expectancy, could that have something to do with the fact of the food that the people eat, the way that they live,
Sure.
the type of work that they do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, Paul Krugman has made the point that some people say, well, people are living longer these days, so we should have a higher retirement age. And he said the problem with that is that the people who have the really hard jobs for which they really need to retire still need to retire at 65. I mean, it's okay for a university professor like me to keep working, but exactly, some people have very difficult kinds of jobs that are dangerous and harmful to health. And we have problems with food distribution. We all know about food deserts and things of that nature. So I think those things, plus, you know, again, the other thing that historically, I mean, those data would show a history, and the notion that somehow people don't die from not having health insurance is false. People have died because they didn't have health insurance, because they didn't go to the doctor, because they couldn't afford it, until their cancer got to stage 4 and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think all of those factors would play into that.
Okay, I'm interested in something that's only been touched on, which is more difficult to measure, I presume, and that is the efficiency of economies. And I can see on the one end for efficiency you need investment, and on the other end you need purchasing power. Now, is it possible to measure efficiency of economies? And if so, is there a correlation with the Gini coefficient?
Yeah, I want to rephrase the thing. First of all, efficiency in economics does have a particular meaning, and it can be measured. But I think, rather than getting into technical details on that, I think the thing that we should sort of shift toward is the idea of productivity. Productivity is the output per person, or the output per worker, or something like that. And productivity goes up because of technological change. And we can measure productivity, and as productivity goes up, we become wealthier, become better off on average and in general. Now, inefficiencies mean that resources are misallocated. And the inefficiency means that you're using your resources incorrectly, and that you could get more output if you just stopped doing that and started using them more efficiently. So that's the sense in which we use efficiency. And I think we can measure that, and I think we can measure productivity for economies as a whole. Does that sort of speak to what you were interested in?
Well, I think there's a problem with productivity. You can have high productivity, but if people can't afford to buy what you're producing, that's a problem for the economy.
Well, in the end, the sort of story is that what is produced generates the income that will buy it. But yeah, I think that's right.
Do Social Security and Medicare show up on the wealth index, or the income index, or both?
Yeah, they should. I'm not sure that they do. Jerry, you may actually know more about this than I, but if you were measuring wealth from somebody who is, say, 50 years old, ideally you would want to include in that person's wealth the present value of his future income from Social Security. But I don't think we do that, do we? We don't do that. So now when it starts being paid out, it then becomes part of people's incomes. And so it shows up there, but it probably is not part of people's wealth. At least it's measured. And again, one of the things that we could spend a gazillion years on is all the problems with measuring things like GDP and wealth and income and all the rest of it. Is what exactly, this is terrible stuff. I mean, it's really, really hard to do.
Social Security should be measured, though, when it's taken as income. It's when it's annuitized.
Well, but think about this. So you put savings into a 401k, and you let it sit there, and you count that as part of your wealth.
Correct.
But you're not taking anything out of it. Social Security would theoretically be the same thing.
Yeah, but if you die before you draw Social Security, unless your spouse gets to take it, or you have somebody who's been with you at least for 10 years to get the spousal, then that's gone. Your 401k.
Yeah, no, I think these are really complex sorts of questions because how would one want to do the accounting on all these different sorts of assets that one might have?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that included, is Social Security income included for the average income for residents of Lincoln Drive?
Here's what's going to happen when they're trying to measure for inequality. They do surveys, and if you're getting Social Security, then it is counted as part of your income. If you're not getting it, it's not counted. Again, when you do a survey, you're looking at people today. What is your income? What are your sources of income, and so on, and then we put that into a database and come up with these measures. But unless you were actually taking Social Security payments, it wouldn't appear.
So I'm going to ask you to put on your fortune teller hat. I'm curious what your thoughts are on how computers and the GPS and everything, when, in my belief, when computers take over, they're going to be completely in charge and only Bill Gates will have money.
Yeah. Well, you know, I sort of like science fiction to some extent, and I was always thought about Star Trek. You know, they've got this free, limitless amount of energy somewhere. They're warp drives and stuff like that. They can go tooling around the universe and have a good time doing stuff, and nobody really has to do any particular kind of work to earn, you know, they've got a replicator for the food and stuff like that. So what would we do if, Jerry, you can correct me, I think Keynes had something that he wrote at one point about when we wouldn't need to work anymore. Because we'd get everything automated, and then we wouldn't, and then we could all paint or write poetry or do something else. You have more to worry about that than I do, because you're young and I'm sort of an ancient mariner. I'm not worried in the least about the robots taking over, because it's not going to happen in my lifetime. So.
Many of you in the room may have seen the recent news story that Finland has initiated a small pilot project of providing a guaranteed income to people. They have a stipend they give to people to address the problem of lack of jobs available, and they're going to see what people do with that money. Do they spend it?
There was also, that was on a ballot in Switzerland, I think, and they voted it down, if I remember correctly. Yeah, this is a movement to have guaranteed income, right?
Well, it's interesting that you made that, that comment about a Scandinavian country, because what I wanted to ask our speaker, I know you're an economist and you study the numbers, but it's interesting to me how, you know, I think some of the Scandinavian countries have the lowest inequality. So in your line of work, what role does cultural values play in that inequality?
Oh, I think it's huge. Remember, I was an anthropologist as an undergraduate, so I'm high on culture. No, I think when we look at that thing, it shows all the differences in these different countries about income distribution. What explains that huge variation? I think a great part of it has to do with history, you know, where you come from. We hear all the time in the United States about our sort of frontier mentality and the kind of attitudes that we have toward a lot of different things from our history and so on. I think it's going to be the same in Scandinavia and elsewhere. So that, you know, to really fully explain why there are those differences is a very interesting question, but it's very hard to do. It take a lot of detailed analysis, I think.
Thank you.
Does that sound right?
Yes, I happen to know some Scandinavians who live in Scandinavia, and the idea we have that if you took away, you know, if you subsidized, if you made it more equal, people would lose their incentive to work. That's somewhat American,
Yeah.
because there's some very well accomplished Scandinavians who get a lot of satisfaction, and they do share their wealth.
On the other hand, Bjorn Borg moved to the United States to avoid
Is the estate tax effective in moderating inequality?
Not terribly. It could be if it were. You have to have an estate of for a couple, I think, of $10 million before you start to have to pay estate taxes. So you're the only people who pay estate taxes are those people who are well within that top 1%. So most people don't pay estate taxes.
If it were at a lower level, would it?
Yeah, and again, this guy Piketty here, he argues for a global wealth tax, because one of the problems is if we put on a huge estate tax, people would have an incentive to hold their estates in Honduras. Or someplace, right, to avoid it and so on. But I used to advocate, I'm not sure I want to advocate this now, but I used to advocate that we should have 100% inheritance tax, so that you take away everything and everybody has to start over. Warren Buffett sort of says, you know, he wants his kids to have enough to be able to go off and do things, but not so much that they can't do anything.
And the fifth speaker, Chuck Collins, has that idea,
Exactly.
you know,
Right.
100% wealth tax. He gave away his inheritance because he thought that was unethical.
I'm actually following up to what she commented, because it strikes me that the argument that nobody will do anything unless they're given a larger share of money than other people follows right along with the thinking that some Christians have, that if you didn't believe in a God that will punish you, nobody would do anything good. And then I look at my own neighborhood, my own family, and I say this simply isn't true. There is altruism and there is service. There's community. And the prevalence of that idea that only monetary rewards will motivate work and invention is
I think it's a very, very interesting question, very interesting observation. The difficulty is I've not ever been completely convinced that if we removed some incentives that, you know, I don't have to be working at the moment, but I'm continuing on because I kind of like some of it. I mean, I like to get together with 15 bright young people and talk about Piketty, you know. So I'm not convinced. The other part of it is that the invention thing, people argue that you have to have intellectual property protection. You have to have patents and copyrights and stuff like that, otherwise people won't do it. I'm not convinced that people would not invent things just for the hell of it, you know, just for fun to do it. Even if they didn't have copyright or patent protection and so on. But there is some evidence that when you measure across a large society, a large number of people, that on average, people do respond to incentives. And so, you know, if you were to remove a lot of incentives, you might not get
Can I
some.
suggest that some of that incentive is the alligator snapping at your ass? You know, that people don't just want money, but they want to get out of poverty, of endangerment, the loss of prestige.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that, of course, again, if you look at sort of middle income people, they don't have the alligators chasing them as much. So, but I do think that, you know, people do behave altruistically. People do have community interests often at heart, and so we have actually, economics has moved beyond the old sort of image of rational economic human beings who calculate every move on the basis of a cost-benefit analysis to recognize actually people don't behave that way, and to try to take account of that as we look at things. But it is true. I mean, I don't know what degree of, say, taxation of wealth would have an impact on how hard people work, or what degree of inheritance tax would have an impact. I mean, if you had 100% inheritance tax, what would rich people do? It'd be great for universities. They would spend a lot of money on their kids, making sure they got the best possible education they could. They'd sort of pre-transfer their income to the kids. So that might actually be better for society as a whole. So, interesting.
I'd like to follow up, is this working? I'd like to follow up on the cultural questions with an example. Charles Wilson, President Eisenhower's Secretary of Defense in 1953, and he was the CEO of General Motors. And he made take-home pay of pre-tax $452,000. After tax, he took home $127,000. The tax rate was top tax rate was in the neighborhood of $90,000. He didn't complain.
Yeah.
What's changed culturally?
Well, I can't give a particularly good answer to that, but one of the things that I notice as I look at the world, yeah, we used to have income tax rates of about 90%. Those were reduced quite substantially with Reagan particularly, but also before that, I think they've been going down. And I don't think that the economy was dying at those rates. But I don't think it necessarily was terribly harmful that they got reduced. 90% seems a little high. The economy grew just fine under Bill Clinton. In fact, it grew better under Clinton than under Reagan when he raised taxes. So I don't think it's necessarily the case that low taxes on the wealthy are going to stimulate economic growth. I think that this has been debunked for a long time. It's the notion that if you lower taxes on the rich, they will so innovate and invest their money that the economy will grow so rapidly that you'll be in great shape. It never worked. This is supply side economics, which never worked, and trickle down stuff. And so I would not disagree. I mean, I think that the higher tax rates on the high income people. Now, the thing that is important to keep in mind here is that already the vast majority of the government's money that it collects comes from high income people because they're the ones who have the money, right? So very low income people don't usually pay income taxes. Our overall tax system, the income tax is fairly progressive. You have higher rates at higher incomes. But if you look at the overall system, Social Security is the ultimate in regressive tax rates because the rich pay a much lower proportion of their incomes in Social Security than the lower income people do. Sales taxes are proportional. So the overall weight of the tax system is not nearly as progressive as is seen by the income tax.
I was wondering though what culturally has changed, because Charles Wilson didn't complain.
Right.
And they do complain now.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Charles Wilson was a good guy.
I mean, the rich are complaining.
Yeah.
We're pushing 9 o'clock. We'll do one more question, and I'm sure that Wes would.
I'll be happy to stick
visit
around.
with you for a minute.
I'm increasingly suspicious that the disparity of wealth is due to perverse legislation and regulation, creating what I kind of call a reverse Robin Hood economy, where you're picking the pockets of the poor to give it to the rich. 2 examples recently, one here in Nebraska where they want to make sure that small microbreweries can't sell at a second site. It's a sort of a Budweiser welfare law.
Yeah.
At the national level, they want to remove caps on transaction fees on prepaid Visa cards. Those are the cards that the poorest people have access to. And those would be 2 examples of how they're changing the rules to, to take money, I think, I would say unfairly from the poor and funnel it up to the top.
Yep.
Is somebody looking at that?
Oh, I think, I'm sure that people are looking at that and so on, but when we look at our country today and think about the political power, where is it? I mean, how did we get what we got? It's pretty crazy because this is becoming a plutocracy, which is taking from the poor and giving to the rich and so on. And this is worrisome because I think it undermines democracy. It does lots of things. I mean, our system isn't very democratic. So how can we, in going out and exercising our vote, hope to change some of these things? I think you're absolutely right. That's one of the things about getting rid of lowering inequality through changing public policies, making the public policies more friendly to low and middle income people as opposed to making them friendly to the rich, which is, I think, the way we're going. The fiduciary rule that's getting thrown out at the moment, these guys who are investing our money and so on are supposed to be doing it in our interest. Well, no, they're not. They don't have to do that anymore. So I think politics is a big deal in all of this, and it's really kind of dispiriting at the moment.
But does this come from the wealth of the Congress and the senators?
Yeah.
The least amount any of them are worth is around $7 million.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. There have been some political scientists who looked at that and they say, basically the folks in Congress have no idea how other people are living because they're all millionaires, and their incentives are all to help themselves out and so on. And when you get to be president, you can send somebody to your hotel and make them pay the price of your hotel on government expense. I mean, it's a really difficult time, I think. So rise up. We have to all get up off our butts and go out there and do something.
Thanks to all of you for being here tonight. Thanks to Wes for getting us off to a good start, and we hope to see you back in a week when the lens will be focused on the state of Nebraska.
Thank you all.